Hello, and thank you for joining us today here at the Bramble Patch. My name is Wendy, and on Technicals today we have Alicia. Today is going to be the last tutorial for a little while. We need to take a break. We've got a lot on at the moment, and Alicia and I do need a little holiday. We're currently preparing for 3 blocks of the month, which start shortly, which you are able to sign up to. There's one for Julie, one for Alicia, and one for myself, and mine you will be able to access an online tutorial to support the project as you work through it on a month-by-month basis. You'll also have instructions. So we hope to be returning in October with these tutorials again, and we look forward to doing that. So today what we're going to do, we're looking at doing the orange peel technique. I had quite a lot of inquiries about this, but people are saying they don't want to do it with the templates as such, where you sew around them, a bit like a drunkard's path template. Now, we don't sell any of the templates for orange peel shapes or the pieced one. So I've put together a very simple method, which basically you really don't need any particular equipment, just your basic equipment. And as you can see here, I've got something laid out. So I did have an orange for my lunch today, and obviously I cut it in the segments in the way that looks like an orange peel technique can be laid out. So I'll just pop that to one side. Now, they're online, on some free websites, you can download the templates free of charge. But in actual fact, you can draw the templates out very, very easily. And I actually drew one out. I brought this with me just to show you. So you can work out what size block you want it to fit into. And you mark out the length that it's going to be going across here. Put a little mark, and then all I did, I just got another kitchen implement, a bowl, a plate, anything, and literally join the dots. And then again on the opposite side. If you feel that that's a little bit too wide or too narrow, if you put a little mark down about 1/2 inch and then mark it as you go through and then just join the dots up, you can make what size orange peel or melon shape, whatever you want it to be. It's a really, really simple technique. To be honest, all you need to do is 1/2, because you can fold it over, and then as you cut it, you're getting it totally symmetrical. So if you're in doubt about getting the second side to match, just fold it over and cut it in 1/2, and that way it's going to be symmetrical. So just pop that one to one side. So this is what looks like the traditional orange peel shape, and there are different layouts that you can do. So I've done this little one in Christmas fabric, and they're just laid out the opposite way round, so you're just twisting the shapes. Again, these are make lovely placemats, table runners, or full-size quilts, and you can do every single segment a different colour. So this is another brilliant one for using your scraps up. Really, really good. So there's a couple of the bigger ones that I did. I started to do this as, this is going to be a front of a cushion when I get it finished. And I've done that in the smaller ones. Again, I've done a full-size quilt in these fabrics, and these were really, really scrappy bits. So I've just used them up, and that will give me a matching cushion to actually go on the bed once I've got this quilt on there. You can have fun with these as well. Now, hopefully you can see this behind me. So this is a very colourful chicken. This is being done by my daughter Claire, and it's really good fun. And she's used very, very tiny orange peel shapes and done it in all different colours. As you can see, it's a work in progress. He hasn't got an eye yet. She started to free machine it, and he's coming on a tree. I think he's going to be absolutely gorgeous. Such good fun. So you can see she's cascaded the colours as she goes down. Again, she's made this totally out of her scraps. So this is going to be really interesting to see what she's finished, because she is quite a queen when it comes to the free machining as well. She does a beautiful job on it. So it's a matter of watch this space. That's going to be fun. If you want to do something a little more subtle, you can just do some blocks. And again, make this some fun. This is actually going to finish up being a wall hanging. So you will have sections where you have the colours meeting, or you will have sections where you get a lot of the white areas. And again, this is being done out of scraps because I've done a quilt in this digital fabric, and I bought quite a lot of it. So these are the leftover pieces from that as well. I do love digital fabric. It's a beautiful quality. So first of all, we'll just look at the very simplest way to do the orange peel. And that is basically just straightforward bondweb. So to do that, all you need, if I can get this around here, is you will take your bondweb and draw. I've already made my, I've got that upside down, my melon shape or orange peel shape, the size that I want it to be. Remember to make sure you are going to, if you're going to use a square, that you want to allow seam allowance as well. So you need to leave seam allowance, make this smaller so that it doesn't go right up to the corners of the block when you actually put it on. So this is just bondweb that I've just put the melon shape on and drew around on the smooth side of the bondweb. Once that's done, it's been pressed onto the wrong side of the fabric. I've then cut that shape out on the drawn line, and then oops, it can be placed actually on your square. And this is what I mean when I say you need to make sure you're leaving your 1/4 inch seam allowance here for it to do. I mean, if you want to just put it on a piece of fabric without joining it, then that looks equally as good as well. So that's the very, very simple way of doing it if you just want to do a straightforward bondweb method, which is pretty much just like an applique. If you want to do it so that the fabric is still quite loose, it gives the effect of it being needle turned. But a lot, if you do the shape of the orange peel, some people struggle a little bit to get the curve without any kinks in it. So this is another really, really simple way of doing it. So all we're going to do is take a piece of fabric, okay, and make sure, what have I done with my shape? Oh, I had it a minute ago. Where's my melon shape? No, let me see it here. Here we go. So take a piece of fabric and make sure your fabric is larger than the template that you're going to be using. Now, my suggestion would be press this fabric before you start working with, we're going to use some Violin, because we need this fabric to be cool once we put the Violin on it, because we don't want it to stick to it. So I've already pressed this piece of fabric like so. Now we're going to use just a Violin, and this has the glue on one side. So it's an adhesive Violin, single-sided. Doesn't matter what weight you use. This just happens to be what I've got. So just a piece of Violin that's actually, once again, larger than the template that we're going to be using. And all I'm going to do is lay that down. Now, we do want fabric overhanging. We do want the violin overhanging the edge of the template. Now, normally you would just use a fabric marker. I'm going to use a biro so that you can actually see what I'm doing. Maybe if I put this white paper underneath it, it will highlight it a little better. Like so. There we go. I'm hoping you can see that. So the violin is bumpy on one side. So the bumpy side is the glue side. So we're not going to draw on that. We're going to draw on the smooth side of the violin. And we're just going to place that and draw around it, draw around the template onto the smooth side of the violin, like so. Now, this is the reason we need to make sure that this fabric is cool when we transfer the violin on top of it, because we're going to put the glue side of the violin down on the right side of the fabric. Again, making sure that we've got fabric all the way around the edges. And what we're going to do now is take this to the sewing machine and sew on the drawn line. This way we can get a nice sharp point at the front. But what we're going to do first of all is we're going to put a little cut in it. You can do it like this and cut it afterwards, but you do run the risk of nipping the fabric. So what I like to do is just take the violin, just fold it just roughly in half. It doesn't really matter where it is. And I'm just going to put a little cut in the center of that melon shape, just there. So if I lay that back down now on top, on the right side of my fabric, so bumpy side of the violin to the right side of the fabric, and here is the cut. But as you smooth it down, it doesn't distort it in any way. If you prefer to, you can now pin it. If you feel more secure doing it, then just do that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my block to the sewing machine, and I'm just going to, I like to start at least 1/4 inch before the mark line that I've drew, because that way you're sewing onto the line, so it's locking that edge in. So I'm just going to start sewing. I've just got a machine on a straight stitch. You don't need to adjust the stitch length at all. And just sew around on the drawn line. This is actually really effective. And I'm just pivoting at the corner and going straight down the other side. We don't need to leave any gaps for turning through, because we've got the little slit that we've cut in the violin to actually turn through. So that means we have no loose edges to sew in. Now I'm going to sew off of that line. Now I'm hoping you will be able to see here, there's a little cross here where I've sewn over the edge, just there. So now you can see that we've sewn on that drawn line. So all we need to do now is actually cut around. We don't need to be too generous. 1/4 inch is more than adequate seam allowance. So just use your drawn line or your stitch line, whichever you find easiest to see, to actually trim away your excess fabric. Now, if you're using different fabrics that may be a little bit thick or anything, if you do feel you need to, you can always clip the curves just to make it turn through easier. I personally haven't found that I've ever needed to. If you use a bigger seam allowance, more than 1/4 inch, then you may find it better to clip it. Now, I've just stitched all the way, cut all the way around there, but at this end here, where there's the point, I'm just literally going to nip that corner off, just to eliminate that little bit of bulk there. Now, remember, do not press this at this point, because otherwise you are going to glue your violin to the right side of your fabric. And this is why I do like to press your fabric first, because we know it's already nice and smooth to start with. So you can turn through with whatever you want to. I'm actually today using one of these hero markers. I do actually quite like these. They work really nicely. But equally, you can use a knife, a pair of scissors, whatever, as long as you don't actually push it too firmly. So all I'm going to do now, if you remember, we cut a little slit in it here. We're just going to turn this through, right the way through. And if you wanted to, if you wanted this to be quite puffy, you could have actually put some wadding on top of the underneath the fabric before you started, if you wanted it to be quite puffy. I've done that in the past if I'm doing something quite pictorial, and it does actually look really nice, because then you can quilt it and you've got quite a high loft. It looks quite nice. So you just turn that through like so, but I like to make sure that everything's pushed out in the correct places. So if you take something like this, but a knife would work because you've got this shape on the end of a knife. If you insert your turner, let's just call it a turner, and what I would suggest, I'm hoping you can see this, I've put this underneath the seam allowance of the orange fabric. You don't want it between the orange fabric and the violin, because the violin's quite fine. If you put it between the orange fabric and the seam of the orange fabric, it means you can apply pressure, and that then pushes that seam right out, nice and crisp, right on the edge. And obviously we're still at this point not using an iron. So I go all the way round. And then once I've gone round with the curved part, what I then do is going around with something a little bit more pointed. So that could be a cocktail stick, a barbecue stick, a pair of scissors, anything to just make that a little bit more refined. Now, as you can see, that's turned through beautifully, and you can't see any of the violin. But all we need to do now is take your fabric, let's see if I got this the right way around, there we go. Take the square of fabric that you want to place this on, and to make sure you centerize it correctly, what I like to do, you could draw a line, but I don't really think it's necessarily. I prefer to actually just give that a press and make sure you're pressing it with the right sides together, because what we want the crease to be in the valley, not on a mountain, because if it's on a mountain, it will pivot on the top. We want it to settle in the valley. That way we can get the points at the right positioning on the block. So here we are, and that is always again cool. You need this to be cool before you place this on, because now we've got the glue side on the outside, which means it now will adhere to the fabric once we put the iron on it. So that now has cooled down. It literally takes seconds. So I would take that, place it. If you want to put markers on it, 1/4 of an inch in on each side, just to make sure you're doing everything correctly, you can do that. And I'm just going to tweak that little point out there before I actually put my hot iron to it, like so. And now I'm just going to literally stamp it. It's much better, rather than putting a lot of movement with moving your iron around, to actually just apply it by stamping it like so. And then what I like to do is just flip it over, and now you can actually maneuver that over your work to make sure that that heat has transferred right the way through. And now you can see that's glued to it, but I haven't yet stitched this. Obviously now is the time when you will stitch it. So if you wanted to, this is when you could actually now hand stitch it. So it would look like needle turned applique, because the edges are tucked under. You have no raw edges. You could take it to your machine. You could do straight stitch, blanket stitch, satin stitch, a decorative stitch. You could do whatever you wanted to. You could do a blind hem stitch if you wanted to, because again, that gives the effect of it being hand stitched. But the difference between doing it this way and doing it with Bondaweb is the fact that this top piece is actually separate. So if you can see that, I'm actually pulling that away. So I've got the back, let me get set in the camera, here, and the front here. So it doesn't look as though it's pressed and it's as flat as it does as if you use a Bondaweb one, because obviously that is stuck all the way down. So this does give a different appearance. It looks as though it's applied more and it's a higher loft, because you've got a ridge around the edge because of the seam allowance that's turned under. I'm just going to give that another little press from where I pulled it out now. So I think you can actually see the difference in the depth of that one as to the one where, thank you very much, Alicia, where this one is very, very flat. And this one is much stiffer, although it's still supple, it's stiffer because the violin is in this one is much softer and much more pliable. So all you need to do then is make as many as you want to in whatever different fabrics, and just decide on the layout that you prefer. You can also obviously do lots of different sizes on the same quilt. They do really look very, very effective. So there we are, ladies and gentlemen. That is the tutorial today on the orange peel. Thank you for joining us today, and for all the other tutorials that you've joined us with through the past year or so. And we do hopefully look forward to seeing you all again in October. Thank you for myself, Alicia, and the rest of the team here at the Bramble Patch. Bye-bye for now.